Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Computing Research Association's UR to PhD workshop. Today's meeting will be recorded. In addition to the recordings, we want to let you know that we do have the Q&A function enabled. The Q&A function should be at the bottom of your Zoom menu. You can ask questions anonymously or with your name associated to them. You can also upvote any questions. If at any point you have any questions, we encourage you to put them there. If you have any questions about how to use the Q&A functions, I'm more than happy to help support with that. With that, I will pass it on to Dr. Patil and Dr. Centeo for the rest of the workshop.
All right. Thank you, Julia. Welcome, everybody, to this next workshop in our series. And this is where you get to hear from current students who were in your position not so long ago. So hopefully learning from your peers will also help you enhance your application packets, as well as get some strategic advice on tips and tricks and best practices. So mostly I'll be in the background today, but again, just to quickly tell you, you already know that my name is Samir Patel. I'm from the University of Utah, and Charles and I are co-designing this workshop series and leading it. So what we will do today is use the panel of your peers or current PhD students to help you enhance your application materials, help you refine the ways in which you're choosing your schools or the criteria by which you are deciding on where to apply, and then adopt any relevant information from the recent experiences of these applicants who applied to grad PhD programs not too long ago, as fit for your own circumstances. So without further ado, I just want to tell you about the logistics. I'm going to do introductions. Well, not me, but the panelists will introduce themselves. And then they will give you, after the introductions, just some brief statement about what it was like for them when they applied for their PhD applications. And then after that, we're just going to open that up to you. So in addition to what Julia said about putting questions in chat, we encourage you to be interactive. If you want to just unmute your microphone and ask questions directly to the panelists, the more interactive it is, the more engaging it might be for all of us. All right, so let's start with introducing our panelists. We have 5 amazing PhD students who agreed to be a panelist for all of you. I'm going to have them just go one by one and quickly introduce themselves, starting with Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a first-year PhD student at Indiana University and in informatics, studying in informatics, and my focus is on privacy and security, and my research area is privacy and for marginalized groups and individuals. So thank you.
Okay, Imani.
Hi, everyone. My name is Imani. I am a 4th-year PhD candidate at the University of California, Irvine, in the Department of Informatics, and my research focuses on pretty much how do we design and develop technology for neurodivergent populations, specifically when we think about their sensory differences. So this would kind of fit in the larger category of health informatics accessibility in that intersection.
Okay, Aaron.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I go to school at the University of Delaware. I'm a first-year PhD student, and my research focus has been high-performance computing, but more as in performance modeling on GPUs.
Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Joy, and I'm a PhD candidate at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University. My research lies on the intersection of human-computer interaction and information studies, specifically looking at uncertainty in health, which is caused due to social media. I'm also a UX researcher at Ipsos and an adjunct faculty at PACE.
Okay, Haston.
Hi, I'm Haston Kapoor. I'm a first-year PhD student at the University of Utah, and my current research areas are computer architecture and cryptography.
Okay, great. So Julia, I think it might be better if I stop sharing for a while we do the interaction so that the cameras are more visible. It feels more interactive. So that's what I will do. And then maybe once again, now thank you everybody for introducing yourselves. Now that you've done that, maybe let's start with a little bit of from each of you reflecting on what it was like when you were applying for your PhD prior to joining the program, joining your current programs. And so, more or less you can choose whatever it is that you want to share for a couple minutes. So we'll just have you go through one by one, and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. So again, let's start with Nick.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I remember whenever I started thinking about if I wanted to do a PhD, it was just because there's a lot of, I wasn't really interested in going into the professional world for computer science, which is what I got my undergrad in. I just didn't find any of the career opportunities particularly like inspiring or exciting to me. But I still wasn't sure if I wanted to do research. So I did an REU at Penn State on machine learning and cybersecurity, and I really enjoyed it. And that really like cemented, okay, like I want to do this, I need to do this. And so then I started looking into grads, like PhD programs, going into like September, going into like my senior year. So I didn't have like a lot of time to, from September to the deadlines in December to like, which were all the deadlines for mine schools were in December to like, research and fully explore all those. So it was and it was a busy semester too on top of that. So it was really chaotic and really stressful and really full of uncertainties and like what exactly like I'm still new to it because I'm an undergrad and there's not a lot of research opportunities at the school I was at because it was a small liberal arts college. So to be honest, I wasn't confident in like a lot of my stuff I was doing. I wasn't sure about what I was interested in. I had like vague ideas. I was interested in a lot of things, but I didn't know confidently that I wanted to do research in this thing and that thing. So it took a lot of time for me to research and look into these papers and look around at professors. And I guess it was just it was chaotic, but I really enjoyed it and I was really excited about it. Everything I read excited me and made me want to like push through the whole application process. And just working in the early hours of the morning or the late hours of the day, trying to finish them up before the deadline. And like at the end of the day, I got fortunate enough to get like 2 acceptances. So a lot of it seemed like luck in some ways, just getting lucky connections with professors. But even with like not a lot of research experience, which I only had 1 research experience, I was still able to do it. So if you're worried about that, I think that I might be a good example that it's not research experience isn't everything. It can be passion and just like, really pushing through it sometimes. So.
All right, thank you, Nick. Imani, you're next.
Yeah, so I would say one of my biggest concerns or fears during the application process is I had no idea what informatics was or what the world of HCI was before applying. My background is mechanical engineering. I had every plan to go into industry. I had a job offer, but my passion was doing work about neurodivergent populations and furthering research in that area. So thankfully, I would say the summer going into my junior year, I did a summer program at UCI where I found out about what informatics was a term, first and foremost. And like that was pretty much my only research experience was that summer during that research. And so like when it was time to apply for grad school, I kind of just had like the encouragement of my summer advisor, who is now my current advisor, just like apply to these schools and see what happens. So it was a lot of like faith and just trusting that like my advisor knew what she was talking about. Because again, I didn't know what HCI was. I didn't know what informatics was. I just knew that I wanted to do autism research. And so like I was just banking on one, getting into UCI and the other 2 schools that I applied to. So I think my biggest concern was just like my lack of knowledge about 1, grad school, 2, being a Black woman in computing, like I did have other mentors who I could look to for guidance for that. So that was kind of scary. And then moving to a completely different area, like I'm from Alabama. Most of my life was kind of revolved around the states around Alabama. So I think just it was a lot of uncertainty of like, would I succeed in grad school versus knowing I would succeed at the job that I was gonna go to after I graduated from undergrad. So I think that's like pretty much like my biggest tensions, I would say, when it came to preparing for grad school.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, so my experience was a little interesting, I guess I would say. I and I'll explain it from the beginning. But I started research freshman year of undergrad, just because it was something that I found interesting and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do yet. And I started liking it enough that I did an RU like Nick. I went to actually Indiana University, and did an RU for a summer, and I liked it a lot. The advisors that I worked with, I loved. They're all really great professors, and I see them at a conference every year now that I go to, um, which I still say hi to them, and they always give me hugs. But yeah, so but after that, I continued with research for the rest of my undergrad, and I wasn't really sure if I really wanted to do a PhD or if I wanted to go into industry. And my undergrad was in electrical engineering. Um, so I was just kind of, figuring it out at the time. And I actually started a job for not too long, but I was working as a software developer. And even though I was an electrical engineer, I don't know, I was baffled too. But basically, I went to a conference, and I had a conversation with a bunch of people at that conference, and one thing led to another, and they told me, we started talking about PhDs. They told me that they kind of liked it, but they also, it was kind of a lot for them, but they said they would definitely do it again. So I kind of started looking into it. And at this time, I already had the idea that I wanted to do a PhD. Um, but of course, I was in industry at the time. And even at the exact same time. So I'm at University of Delaware. I went to my undergrad at Delaware, um, but I was planning on moving to California. I was planning on moving to San Diego, California, because honestly, I went there for 5 days and I fell in love with it. Um, but what happened was, um, I was applying for, and I only applied to actually University of Delaware. I didn't apply to another school because I kind of wanted to stick with my advisor that I worked with during my undergrad. So I just applied. I talked to her for a little bit, and yeah, it kind of just like rolled quicker than I could think about it. I already had um, a job offer lined up in San Diego, so it was so quick that I was kind of excited, but also kind of nervous about it at the same time. Um, but yeah, and then I just stayed in Delaware for, I guess now, 4 more years until I'm done.
Okay. Karen?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Thinking back to like how I got into my PhD is exactly what I guess Nick was saying, that there are uncertainties. For me, it was uncertain because I had no clue what I'm doing. I didn't know that I had to do a PhD. I actually got pushed into it because my master's advisor came up to me and said, "Hey, you did some research with me as an RA. Do you think this is your future, or do you just want to go to the industry?" So I feel like that's the first time I considered, oh, I can actually consider um, maybe staying in research longer and not doing an industry job. But like I said, I hadn't considered it, and I had a full-time job offer. So I joined that company. 3 months in, I was like, I love what I'm doing, but I do feel there is some sort of purpose missing. And I guess Imani put it the best way. Like, we want to further our work the in the domains that we have picked for ourselves. So I guess that was the biggest reason, is like, okay, I'm gonna take a break from the industry and go back to school and try and do a PhD. So I went back to my master's advisor thinking he would take me, but he kind of said, we have to make our own paths. So just apply to a bunch of schools and see where you get in. And if I did get in, then he would take me back. But thankfully I got in. So yeah, that was my kind of like a wave of getting into a program.
Right, and then Haston.
Yeah. So as these deadlines were approaching, I wasn't 100% certain if I still wanted to, if I really knew what doing a PhD entailed. Because I hadn't done any internships, I hadn't done any REUs, I didn't know what research was like. And so in my last semester, I started working on this undergraduate thesis, where while I was applying to PhD programs, this idea was just building up, saying, I really need to see what research is like. So why not try it? Why not do something that might reflect what a PhD program could look like? And so I chose to work on something that was kind of on the intersection of where I was and where I wanted to be. Because as an undergraduate, I was a math major. And now I'm more towards computer science. And so I picked some interesting topic. And in doing this project, I realized that I really do enjoy doing research. And so I was certainly glad that I had the forethought to apply to PhD programs, even when I wasn't entirely sure. But everything's worked out. And I do think I've gotten to a good place now.
Okay, well, thank you all. To our student attendees, basically, as you see, there's a whole range of institutions and research interests and also backgrounds represented across the panel here. So now this is your chance to ask any burning questions you have of our panelists. Take it away.
And if you'd rather type it, I'm looking at the Q&A, so you can get questions to us in the panel that way as well.
So while I guess people are still formulating their thoughts and thinking through questions, so maybe I'll ask the first question while to give people a chance to think of their own. But and any of you or many of you can tackle this. And knowing what you know now, both having gone through the PhD application process and now doing at least a little bit of your PhD program, right? For some, it's the first term. For others, it's a little bit into it. What would you do differently in the application process? What, if anything? And why, of course?
I would start earlier. I had the bad habit of procrastinating a lot, and it's a lot of work because you have to apply to a lot of places, and they all ask for different things. So you have to make sure that all of these different statements that they ask for, you need to tailor them to each university, and it's a lot of work. So the earlier you start, the better.
I would also say, like, really consider the program and the professors you're applying to and who you're mentioning, because there were some applications I did that I was just going through the motions just to have an extra school on my thing, and I honestly probably wasted more time when I could have given it more attention to something that was honestly higher on my list and of way more interest. I know my girlfriend applied to, I applied to like 7 schools. My girlfriend applied to like 25 or something. And she, like, unfortunately didn't get anything back except for like 1 professor, 2 professors, and the 1 professor was not someone that she wanted to work with, and they like sent her this huge document of all the rules and how like they expect her to pull multiple all-nighters in a row, and like all these really just things that wouldn't be a good working environment. So like sometimes you need to take time to evaluate if something's worth it. And sometimes just shotgunning things might not necessarily be the best idea because, you know, it's a long, tough process and it requires like a good partnership with a professor. So if you're looking at someone and they don't seem like you would work well, it's hard to tell, obviously, just looking at that professor profile. So maybe I would say reach out, which I didn't do. I actually got reached out to by the professor, one of the professors I mentioned, so I got lucky. But reaching out to professors, I wish I did that. I wish I did that more, because then I would have actually known if I would have liked to even work with the person I was applying to, or if it was just a waste of time or not. So.
Yeah, so there's two things that I would do differently. First is peer support. So like this is an awesome group of people that are like they're putting this series together for you to kind of help you out. Pay attention to who's in the room with you. So it's very likely that they'll also be applying to grad schools around the same times that you are. Lean on each other for like, hey, swap application packets. Will you read over my statements? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Don't look at it as a competition, because you can't really determine who the school is going to pick. What you can do is support each other in getting into the school that they want to get into. And if you see someone who's applying to the same department or the same school as you, support each other, look at each other's application, because you never know, that could be your actual lab mate. So peer support is big. The second thing I would do differently is reach out to the PhD students within the departments or the labs that you're interested in working in, because what they don't necessarily tell you is that the professor is really just the supervisor. It's the students who are doing the work, depending on what type of setup you're in. So reaching out to the student can help you understand what is the day-to-day like in this lab, what can I expect, and they're just a lot less intimidating to reach out to than the faculty person who has all these accolades that seem so unapproachable. So like definitely figure out who are the people in the lab that could be people that you can reach out to learn about what the advisor is like, what is the school like, what is the climate, so that you can make a more informed decision about, is the lab and is the school really a fit for you? So those are my two things I would do differently.
Okay. Do we have any audience questions yet?
A couple of questions in the chat, I think, that might be helpful. I'd love to hear what the panel thinks, and any one of you can take this, knowing that we might not have the same answers. So I'm going to read one, and I might combine that with another one. Reflecting on your experiences, what red flags have you seen in your own life or in others that you suggest avoiding in the application process, like reaching out to professors, emailing them before you apply, on the statement of purpose, communicating with faculty, staff, etc. So how would I'd like to hear from the panel on that. Red flags.
I have one really quickly. Be genuine, I guess. Like if you were to reach out to a professor, they can tell if you're not genuine. My advisor every so often will say, when we're trying to, create a resume or something like that, she'll bring up an email or something that she got, and she definitely can tell if it's written by Chat GPT or Claude or some AI generated. But when somebody emails her that's genuine, or like I'm willing to like learn, put in time, I just want to get something out of it. She's interested, and she's definitely willing to help anybody get what they want. But definitely um, be genuine with what you want.
Yeah, I'm with that. Oh, sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, yeah, mine's really fast. Just like with personal statements and statement of purpose, like there was one guy who I had a group of friends in my undergrad who were all applying to PhDs together, and the one person, unfortunately, they applied to like a couple schools, and they were probably the like highest achieving in terms of academics. So it was just one of the smartest guys I ever met. But I don't think their personal statements were very strong, in the sense that they didn't have some like it doesn't have to be super, super crazy, but just some sort of emotional thing, or like genuine like aspect of that statement to kind of just show off like what you care about. I think is really important. Making it something where it's like you're doing it for a reason beyond just wanting to have the doctor in front of your name, or like just to do it because you make more money. Like, it doesn't have to be anything like unique or that crazy or special, but just saying, like, really making sure you're letting them know that like it's not just something you're doing, it's a passion, and it's like something you're doing for the right reasons of like caring about, wanting to help the world, help somebody, help anyone. Like making that clear, I think, is really important. At least that's what I've noticed.
I'm going to piggyback off of that because that's exactly where I was going. I think a question to ask yourself while writing the SOP or any other statement is just like, am I trying to get into the school, or am I really trying to work with the person that I'm applying to? That becomes a huge thing because I'm not going to name this, but from my personal experience, one of the schools was great. The research program was great, the professor was great, but the environment was just terrible. So I picked Rutgers instead because Rutgers has a core heart of students. You're not the only one. You have support. There are people above you, and there are new people coming in next year. So you always have a PhD student with you. But I guess for the first half of the application process and then getting accepted into the other school, I was just so zoned in on, oh, I'm losing a great, ranking. I'm losing a good city. I'm losing a bunch of things. So I guess like when you're writing your statements and making applications, it's important to know that it might go another way than you think it's going. But the one thing you can do in those statements is kind of stay true to the idea that Nick said, like you want to research and you want to have the work go forward instead of like being at a grade school.
I will kind of add to those two. A red flag, typically for like the person you're applying to, well, two things is one, cold turkey emailing them. I will just use my advisor, for example, is one of for me, this was her advice for me as I'm applying to the job market, which is kind of similar, I would say. Her advice was like, don't cold turkey email someone, find someone to make an introduction for you. Especially because basically a lot of this depends on like who you know to a degree. And so like if you can like, and a good shoe-in would be one of those PhD students. So like if you've already had a conversation with a PhD student, they can say, oh, hey, such and such, this student is interested in applying to the lab. Would you take a meeting with them? I've talked to them and they're like they can kind of be your champion to the faculty position, because we also have to understand that professors are getting thousands of emails a day, depending on their position. So like just getting a random email, and also some of them don't manage their own mailboxes. So that's also something to consider. So kind of having a familiar name to kind of like introduce you to that person can be helpful rather than just reaching out randomly. And I also understand sometimes that's what it's going to require. But if you can kind of do the extra labor of like saying, okay, who is this person connected to that may be my professor at a school that I'm already attending? They know the person that I want to work with. So that can be a way of like kind of also getting your foot in the door in a more warming way to the professor.
Okay, well, I see a hand raised. Harper, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of preface, I'm really quite lucky in the chance that I'm getting to go to an event that will let me go and talk to potential advisors in person. So I wanted to ask the panel, what do I need to what are the key things I need to be asking these people to understand what life might be like in their lab?
Honestly, one good thing is, what is their research trajectory for the next couple of years? Because a lot of the work that is done is funded by grants, and what they write into those grants, they have to carry out to a degree. So like if you have an idea of like, oh, like what are they doing in the next couple of years, you can better gauge, is this person a good fit for me? Even because sometimes their personal websites may or may not be up to date. So if you had the opportunity to have that one-on-one conversation, just ask them, what does your trajectory look like for the next couple of years? So that you can kind of make a more well-informed decision and then let them know, oh, I'm interested in this, or I'm not interested in this. So like, I think that would be one question you could ask.
My other go-to is especially sometimes if I panic and I don't know what else to say, I'll be like, well, what's the culture like at your lab? Just to get like a quick, easy thing that I can then maybe get some extra jumping points to go from there if they describe it. But that's always like an easy one for me if I'm panicking and I don't know what else to ask. It is important also to know like if the culture is like, if they say like, oh, like, I like, my students having this kind of like work ethic and like they're having this interactions and you like the sound of that, that can be really good to know. But if they're like, well, I like it really cutthroat and it's like really scary where I work, that's some people might find that useful and helpful and like want that, but it's also good to know if you don't want that. So
I'll just offer up an easy icebreaker. When you read a paper that someone has written, or even the abstract or a title, you have us at hello. So if you can just read a paper, like a recent paper that we have published, I think this is true for any professor at any level, and you actually, show that you've read it at some level, and you might ask a question about it, that's very, I think it's pretty simple unless someone tells me differently, and that makes a huge impression. Not enough people who approach us do that.
Yeah, just a general networking tip is people like to talk about their research. They're researching it because they find it interesting. And so if you can try and discuss, even if it's as you said, just reading the abstract or the title or something small, just show interest in their work, it'll leave a very positive impression that you also care about learning more about their stuff.
and it can be hard, like especially if you're still trying to learn like how to read research papers. It can be a pretty daunting thing that really sometimes hard to crack into if you've never really done it before. So I also could recommend like looking up. A lot of professors will have like lecture videos that they've done, like or some sort of public speaking that they've done, and sometimes they can like make that a lot more of a digestible like way to experience what their research is kind of about. And that's honestly what I did when I was first looking at the professor I was looking at here. I watched the one of her lectures and I was like, oh, okay, this makes perfect sense. And she connected with the fact that I explicitly like talked about that kind of talk I watched from her and explained how I liked it and like this and like that. So even if papers are really hard to understand sometimes, so you can find a lecture video and that can also work.
Does that answer your question, Harper? Do you have a follow-up?
I think it's definitely given me a lot to work with now. I think I relate a lot with Nick in the fact that I'm coming from a small college as well. I did an RU this summer, and I'm doing a lot of classes, a lot of really hard classes in conjunction with the application process. So I'm really having a hard time, I guess, mainly keeping an eye on the future and making sure I'm doing what I need to do there, but also the daily work, the homeworks and stuff like that, studying for exams. So Nick, is there anything that you would tell me specifically that would sort of keep me like, on the right path essentially and make sure that like I can do both?
Yeah, I totally get it. I was taking crazy like courses and had some really tough professors right when I was doing my apps, and it was really infuriating because I also had my deadlines right at finals. All my other friends were after finals, so they had the winter break, and I was like, oh, this sucks. So totally get it. It's really hard. Obviously, there's just going to be some points where it's just sheer will and you're just pushing through it. But I would honestly say I'm I think a lot of us here probably were very grade oriented and very much caring about our GPAs and this and that. Um, Especially though you're doing your applications, you can I don't know like some people it depends on the professor. Some professors wouldn't like to see it, but like you know you can maybe let it falter just a second and just like sacrifice a bit of the grade work or some time. And I know it's really hard. I did that for exams. I failed an exam for the first time ever in my undergrad life. Not saying that you have to do that, but I did something like that because I was like, I'm gonna put time on the side and just do this and work on this thing. But also, I think getting back to that thing of like, you write out, your statement of purpose, and instead of you relying on yourself to do a lot of it, like anyone that you can possibly find to help just look over it and get some feedback can help, like, get some time in on that, but also set it aside and have someone else help you out just for like a quick look over to give some grammar or some structure fixes or just anything can help. But I know it's really hard at the same time to balance that stuff. And like, sometimes you have to make the calls of just, not being perfect on like some work for the day and like accepting a slightly like lower grade just to give some more time to the applications. I know it's hard, so just keep powering through. I know you got it. So
Thank you. Would you recommend, so I think I've got things relatively, like, I think things are in a place where I could apply early, like I could just apply, but it's becoming a little bit difficult with like, okay, I really want these to be strong. And I think giving them more time will give them that opportunity, but I'm also like, well, I don't want to be in a situation where I get an acceptance and then they look at my transcript for this semester. So would you say that if you were looking back, were you happy with when you applied, or would you have applied earlier or done things a little bit differently?
yeah, I mean, I applied. I kind of did a sort of sequential step through my top list here. I looked at the programs I liked the most, and I focused, got it done, focused, got it done, and I walked through it. So it was slowly cranking them out over time. I didn't like push all my apps at once in a way. So maybe that might be like something where you prioritize. Like, I really am interested in this program. I really like the sound of this program. This professor's work is really great, and you can then maybe like ensure that you're maybe you can like hone in on that like app that you have done, really make sure it sounds really good, but like at some point you're gonna have you have to kind of accept, because I don't know, this is me being ignorant of the process of how they look at apps. Like, does it matter how early it is or not? I'm not sure. That's something I don't know. But I also remember thinking like, oh, if I get it in earlier, maybe I can make sure I secure a spot. So I know that pressure, and I maybe someone else can speak on that for me because I'm not sure how that actually works, but
I can
do
speak
remember
on that really quickly. So unless there is an early application deadline, it really doesn't matter if you submit your application on November 2nd or December 15th if the deadline is December 15th. Typically, the applications will be looked at by the committee after the advertised deadline. But I think just one more thing I will add is this is where fighting procrastination, as Hasten was talking about, and being a little bit more organized and distributing your work, but applications as well as courses can help you not run into that stress mode where it's like all 10 applications are due today. So just taking a step back and planning a little bit, it's not going to add hours to your day, but the constant chaos of, okay, am I forgetting something? Or now like 10 things are due, what do I do? If you plan ahead of time, you will make strategic and calmer decisions than being influenced by stress. So that's just some things from me.
Something really, yeah, just had to quickly pitch in. Something that happened with me is I applied to a school to work with a professor, and turns out that that professor was moving, and they told me that they were moving to a school that wasn't on my radar for application. Could happen to you, so always best to start early.
Other questions? Feel free to ask directly or ask in chat.
I have a question about the personal statement. So do you have any panelists now? Do you have any special tips that helped you write your statement of purpose or personal statements?
I would say a tip that was given to me was, one, for the university that you're applying for, especially if they have like a DEI initiative, which majority of university does have, see like what are certain things that you can talk about in regards to your personal history that you can include for that particular university. That's one thing. But then also not afraid, like don't be afraid to be authentic and personal. Another piece of advice I was given was like the personal statement is a way for the faculty people to know you before they get to know you. It's their first, like, yes, they can look at your transcripts, they can look at your resume, they can look at all your research statement, but when they're trying to figure out like who are you as a person, they're going to look at that personal statement. And so that's where you really want to let who you are shine and who you are as a person come through. So I'm not saying like write a sob story. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like let them get to know you in the most genuine form. And the way that you can know if you're doing that is if you hand it to a family member, says, does this sound like me? And they say yes. Then you be kind of, because like no one knows you better than your family, I believe, or your closest friends. So I would focus on those two things, the DI statements, if the school has that on their website somewhere, and how you align with those things, look at that, but then also put yourself on paper and then let someone who knows you read over it, and they can kind of tell you like, oh, I think you're kind of bluffing here, or oh, talk about this a little bit more. I think this is interesting. So yeah, those are two pieces of advice.
Don't be afraid to pull from, I don't know, just it can be from sometimes unexpected spots that you'll find like something that sounds really good to go along with like explaining like your process of how you got from like, you know, where like way back where you started and say like high school of your interest all the way till now. I know a lot of my friends and I, like we all used our some high school like inspiration where we found like our initial passion or love for what we're studying or what we would want to do in our future. Like, you know, I pulled some research project, like little tiny research project I did for AP computer science in high school, and like talked about how that got me interested in like just some stuff that I still do today and like want to keep doing. So like, yeah, like it might sound silly, but like no, they want to see that like to see that process, that journey, like how you got to be who you are and where you want to keep, like why you want to keep going, like how that spark goes. So if you're looking for inspiration, maybe think about the spark that like got you going.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a really good point that um, I really struggled with the personal statement because I personally am not very good at writing. Um, and so what what I did was I tried to look for examples and I tried to see, okay, what do other people write about? And the problem that you might fall into is becoming cliche. Um, what you should take away from examples isn't exactly what their story was, but what they showed by telling you this story. And so that's why I really agree with the point of finding what was that spark that really made you enjoy this area, because it'll be unique. And that is probably something very important that they read so many personal statements. And if it falls into one of 5 categories that they see 100 times, it's not going to stand out. And so finding something unique, even if it doesn't sound as necessarily as strong as what you might get from doing something cliche, the fact that it is unique is going to stand out more.
Are there other questions in chat or anybody else wants to chime in here and ask a question? Yeah, go ahead, Harper.
I wanted to ask about letters of rec and how you all navigated that process, because it's been a little bit confusing for me on who would be the best people to choose. I have multiple people that are willing to, and I'm also seeking out research advisors from previous internships and REUs. So how did you pick, or how did you go about that process?
I can jump in real quick here. So I did do 3 recommendations, but they were not the same 3 people for each school. I based it off of the research that I was showcasing to the school and to the professor at that school, and then who was the closest match to them. So there is a possible chance that they know each other from someone's, from their common circles at conferences. That happened a couple of times for me. So I think one of the things would be to see if you have a, common circle of the professor you're trying to work with, if there's someone in that circle who can recommend you, or maybe know someone who can recommend you, and that can put you kind of up there a little bit.
I didn't have a deep bench for my selection of professors. My computer science faculty, there was 3 professors, and I'd probably say only like one of them could have, 1 or 2 I would have relied on for a letter, and then I had my REU professor, and then one sort of professional who I had the side job as a student, and I worked under them, and it was related to technology. So I had about 4 to 5 options. It was a really tough because I guess the thing that I've always heard is that it can't be someone that you just did well in their course or something. Obviously, just make sure that they know you and what you can do, what you're capable of, your potential, your work ethic. I mean, I just can't speak on research aspects because I didn't have much to pull from that. But I think it can sometimes just be a lot of about, at least from my understanding, was I just looked for people who would be able to speak to my potential, my character, and my work ethic. Was the best I could do. So that's how I navigated.
Are there other questions or any questions in chat? Maybe I'll
All
ask.
right, there's one in the
Go ahead.
chat.
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
currently working on writing bullet points about my experiences to help my professors when they write my recommendation letters. Do you have any suggestions on how to communicate my experiences effectively to my professors?
Really quick. For when I was writing bullet points to about your experiences, I mean, the first thing you think of is try and connect your bullet points to them, to what they know about you, to what you know about them, what your connection is between the two of you, and how you can basically what they know the best about you. So what can they give more of a idea about who you are and what you can do at that university. So I definitely would try and go in that route. Personally, for me, I also focused on other things at the university that you could do as well. So not also just your work ethic, but how I guess your character is and how you communicate with people and how you can basically interact with maybe the future professor that you would work with, or teams or something like that.
Okay, so I'll ask a question which we haven't covered, a topic which we haven't covered yet. Could you provide some thoughts on selecting universities or narrowing down, or were there constraints that you loosened or tightened, or how might, and even if it's other people who may have different constraints, how might people go about either being more open or being more focused and trying to just navigate through hundreds of options and narrowing them down to a few that are the most suitable?
I would say one way you could filter is to look at also just what the program entails in terms of curriculum can be helpful. I mean, a lot of people focus obviously on the professor, which is most certainly like probably I would say the most important thing is who you're working with and what the research is. But if you're looking for other ways to split hairs, I think curriculum can be a helpful way of getting an understanding of what um, if you want more, if you want to be focusing also on that, front, you should, definitely consider like what courses you could take, going to need to take, what do they look like, just so you can get an idea of those first, like, 3 years or so, what those are going to be like, how the quals for qualification exams just work. Yeah, I mean, like, I know that like that some people might not even look at that, and I didn't really look at that, but like I think it could be a suggestion if you're unsure about like if you're gonna like a program, you're trying to split hairs, that could be helpful.
I think for me, a big one was if I was going to be the only person in that department. And I mentioned this at the start, when answering another question, is like, I think one of the biggest constraints for me was but researchers usually tend to be people who work alone and are in their books and papers forever. But you want to be alone in a library with four other researchers, right? Like, there has to be some people around you, some students who might be in the same boat as you. So I think that was a little big for me. And then, this comes into play when you're doing your qualifying exams, when you're doing classes together, you end up spending time around these people so much that some of my closest friends are now people who are in my PhD. I know that job applications can be stressful, and just having a support network or a peer network that Imani was saying in front of at the start of the session might be helpful at such times. So one of the constraints was definitely, are there students that I can be with, or is the professor who I work with, kind of a social person who can like introduce me not just like faculty but also to other students, and just have a kind of a network going.
To add to those, I would say apart from just like the academic parts of it, but also socially, is there a community where you're going? Again, for me, it was very important that I had community who looked like me. Again, coming from Alabama, I was used to seeing Black and brown people. And so not only like is there a population that looks like you on the campus that you can connect with, but also in the location that the university is situated. Is it what is the social climate there? Am I gonna have extracurricular activities, especially if you're someone who values having a balance between doing your research and your work and also having a life? Some academics don't believe in having a life. You should have a life outside of your research. So like having that balance is really important. But also like, what is the environment like where you're moving? There, Seattle, like I literally have a friend now who is a postdoc at UW, and it's always gloomy. That does not work well for her because she's a very like vibrant person. So like knowing also like where you're moving to can impact how you thrive at the institution. So it's not always just about the academic environment, but like how will I as a person thrive in the environment that I'm applying to? So know what your parameters are when it comes to your social life. Do you may not be considering this now, but if you want to be married, is it likely for me to find a partner in that area? Like those are things that also you should consider when you're applying to the universities that you're looking at. Yeah, that's all I wrote down.
You mean gloomy weather-wise, right? Not emotionally.
Yeah.
No, but anyway, so we are coming toward the end. I just one quick question I wanted to ask was whether if you did email professors ahead of time when you were applying, what strategies did you use to do that? And is that something that you would advise students do ahead of time before they apply?
Yes. If I had to give a short answer, yes, definitely email them. I would say one of the suggestions that was given to me by a professor while applying for PhD applications was if you send them an email, don't expect a response in like 3 days, right? There might be a chance they might not reply to you or reply in 2 weeks. So you kind of have to time that. Second, you don't want to keep emailing someone, right? You don't want to give them more emails than they already have. So maybe just stop at one. If there's someone you really like and they haven't replied in, let's say, 2 weeks, then you can kind of send a follow-up like, hi, bringing this back up to the top of your inbox. But definitely email. That would be my suggestion.
I did like 7 applications. I only got 2, and one was the REU where I did my REU, and the other one was IU here. And I just got lucky with someone reaching out to me. And so, I mean, I'm not saying like I don't know how much it would have changed anything if I emailed some professors and like really did that legwork, but I think if I took the time or like cut down on the number of like apps I was doing just so I can focus on actually like pulling more meaningful connections out from like trying to even just give an email a shot, like maybe it would have helped. So you know, that's why I can say.
I'll say, if you do intend to email professors, don't let it be too generic. Don't just say, hey, can we find a time to meet? Thanks. Make it purposeful but succinct. Tell them what you want to talk about. Tell them what your interest is. Tell them the things that they need to hear to make them interested in having a meeting. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot better to be able to talk with them directly. And so this email should just be starting a chain of communication. It shouldn't be the only thing that you're sending to them.
Okay, so I will share my screen back since we're almost toward the end. I want to thank all of our panelists for their time and their answers. If you still have further questions, feel free to enter them in chat. We might have a couple minutes extra to cover them, but while you do that, I'm going to hand this back to Julia for the next parts.
Thank you, Samir. So thank you all for attending this workshop. I think we always want to be able to meet the needs of the folks who participate in these sessions. Samir, do you mind going to the next slide? It'd be really helpful if you could complete the survey that will come up in your screen after this meeting ends. You can also access it via this QR code as well as the link. In general, we really want to hear what you would like to see more of. We want to know if these workshops, if these sessions are meeting your needs, if there's anything else that we could be doing to help support you in your journey. And at the bottom of the survey, there will also be a question about what you would like to see more of. Samir, do you mind going to the next slide? You can really tell us anything you would like to see. A couple examples of things that might come up in the spring are things like technical talks or hands-on workshops where you can learn technical skills or soft skills. You might want more social or informal events. Generally speaking, we want to be able to provide content that will make sense for you and that you will want to attend. So if at any point you think I would love to see XYZ, please just put that into the survey. The survey shouldn't take very long to complete, so any information is always helpful information for us to be working with. Next slide. In addition to having this panel workshop, we have a few more workshops left in this series. Our next workshop will be From Good to Great, a peer review of your application. So if you can bring a resume or cover letter or a personal statement of purpose, anything that you want reviewed, it can be reviewed by a peer. So if you can bring something to that workshop, that will be extremely helpful for others to be able to provide you with some guidance and or some feedback on how to improve your existing applications. Again, bring something to the next session that it can be reviewed by your peers. Additionally, at this point, we'd like to remind you that deadlines are coming up. So if you haven't already started to create accounts on applications portals, if you haven't already set a list of schools or programs you're applying to, and if you haven't already confirmed your letter of recommendation writers, now is the time to do so. As our panel mentioned, the sooner you do things, the better, so that you're able to get a little bit more feedback and have more of a cushion for when application deadlines actually do come around. And in addition to this session or this series, we also offer an engagement and awareness series. And our last session for the fall is coming up on Monday, November 18th at 6 p.m. It will be all about networking. So what is networking? How do you network? What is an elevator pitch? How do you put one together? And then some tangible practice. So to attend that session, we do ask that you register. This QR code will take you to it, but you can also find the registration link on our website, cra.org/UR2PhD. With that, I just want to extend another thank you to our panel for joining us today and sharing your experiences. I know I found it really helpful. So I really appreciate you being as transparent and as candid as you were.
Great. And then, yeah, we'll stick around for a couple minutes in case people have further questions.